Righto, today's little project. If you've watched any of my videos, you know that I like picking up crap off the side of the road, rebirthing it, giving it a bit of a new lease of life, and either giving it away, on selling it, whatever. Bit of petty cash, and it's a lot of fun getting old crap that other people throw out, getting it going and singing like it's brand new, or in some cases better than brand new. In this case, I sold a whipper snipper, or a line trimmer, to a dude in a street around the corner. And not this one. I'll flick up a pic of the one that I sold. It was another Makita, and it ran like a dream. Anyway, he said, I've got another one that I can't get running, so can you come and tune it for me? I'll pay you. So somehow I've turned into a service technician for Makita. So this one, I'll show you what it does, which is not a lot, and I'll show you what I'm going to do to give it a bit of a rebirth, so that if you see stuff like this, or you've got it lying around your shed or your garage, you can basically follow these simple steps and get your whipper snipper, no matter what the brand, singing again, because they're all pretty much the same. Okay, so first things first, this is that's the model number there, ER2600L. Now, it's full of fuel, choke is set to start. You've got a 3 position here, or sliding position from fully closed off, can't quite see that, but fully closed off, to fully open, which is run, which is warm. Press your fuel bulb 10 times or so. Make sure your start position is in run, not stop, which disconnects the magneto or the coil. And oh, it wants to start. So this is given to me dead, and it seems to run like a charm. Anyway, I'm going to give it a service anyway, and I'll show you how I do that. That's hilarious. So, first things first, pull out the spark plug. Now, the gap for these is always the same, lefty-loosey, righty-tighty. Now, and this one is gummed up to buggery, so I'm going to give that a bit of a clean. This is just to get oil off it, a little bit of emery paper, and then I'm going to check the gap. Now, I've got some feeler gauges. These are really cheap to buy, but you don't absolutely have to buy them. This should be 0.8 mil, so 0.75 is very, very, very close. It's not a high accuracy instrument. And that is pretty tight. So if I put that in there and just wiggle that around, that is now going to be, if it's going to be just clutching at 0.75, I think 0.8 is going to be perfect. So again, I'm just going to clean that off a bit, and that's the first thing done. And because we know that we've got spark, as I said, I don't need to check the coil. Let's pop that bad boy back in there. Give it a bit of a tweak. Doesn't have to be too tight, just a tap is enough. Okay, now next, pull the carby apart and give it a clean. Very complicated set of tools here. One Phillips head screwdriver. They're all pretty much the same, either 1 or 2 or 3 screws. Now, curiously, this doesn't have an air filter in it, which is not going to be very good, so there should be a foam air filter in there. So I'm going to cut out some sponge foam. Old mattresses are perfect for this, or an old bench cushion, something like that, and cut out a filter that's going to fit that. So I'll show you what I do with that in a second, but first things first, these 2 screws are tight, very tight, so I'm going to have to rattle those off. There we go. So basically, you've only got a couple of parts in a whipper snipper. I'm sure you know all this. You've got a carburetor, you've got a coil, which is your spark energizing system, and that's really it. So if you've got a spark, and if you've got fuel, then, or if you've got no spark, it's your coil. And if you've got no fuel, it's your carburetor. It's as simple as that. The ripcords on some of these can be a little bit of a pain to fix, but I've never found any that couldn't be pulled apart and reassembled, requiring special tools. And also, just pay attention to all of this when you pull it apart, so that when you go back together, you know where screws go, you know where bolts go, you know where you get a little spring washer there, you know where that goes. So I'm just going to kind of slide these in a partial reassembly position, so that I know when I put it back together how it all fits together. That's that. Give that a bit of a clean, little gasket, one carburetor. So the guy that gave this to me, and he's going to pay me to service it, I don't know what he's going to pay me, 50 cents an hour or a peanut butter sandwich. He said that it would start but it wouldn't idle. So there we go, carby's off. You just have to remove the throttle. And you can see here, well, I'll pull the whole thing off and show you, but there's actually no carburation adjustment on this. There is only an idle speed adjustment screw. So all I'm going to do, take a photo, and the reason that I'm doing that is so that I don't stuff up the hose connections for the fuel lines, even though one's big and one's small. In a moment of anxiety, you don't want to try and put the wrong fuel line on the wrong part of the carburetor. So I'm just going to use some pliers just to try and pry these off. Sometimes these fuel lines, might be easier from the other side, some of these fuel lines can be very degraded, and they can fall apart. There we go, that's coming off. Didn't want to, but it did. Just using a thumbnail there. There we go, one carburetor. Fuel lines can decay and the fuel bulbs can decay. These are worth about $1.50. This one feels pretty good and nice and supple. And what I was going to say is, on this particular model of carby, there is no adjustment mixture screw. There we go. Full open, close, full open, full close. There is no mixture adjustment screw. There's just the supply line, and then this is the return line. So when you can't flood these really. When you press the fuel bulb, they normally say 10 presses. It sucks the fuel out of the fuel tank and then returns it into the tank. Anything that's unused gets returned into the tank. So really, 4 or 5 presses should be more than ample. If you've got to press it more than that, you've got some other problems. So again, this is these are basically heat shields. Look how clean this is. So I'm just going to leave that there so I don't mix up the placement of those gaskets and the heat shield there, because I don't need it. Fuel lines can stay where they are. And I'm just going to pull the carby apart, give it a blowout, give it a clean, and reassemble, and we should be good. Okay, so now that I've got everything apart here, it's really, even though it's a very basic motor, what you don't want is you don't want to be sucking crap and dust and bits of your garden basically through your carburetor. You are worried about crap getting into these very fine jets in here. So all I've got is a little bit of old bed mattress maybe. I'm going to cut that out, and you know that that is your template there. Old pair of scissors, cut it out and fit it in. Alright, so we know that this is our template here, so that's kind of roughly what we're looking at. And you've got to kind of eyeball it to see how deep you have to go, but you can see it's not particularly deep, so I'm going to overcut it because this foam compresses quite well, but you can't over compress it because the air's still got to get through. So you don't want to be restricting this airflow, but you also want to capture any particulates that are getting into your precious carburation system. And that's kind of what it looks like, and then that just clips together. Next step is to pull the carby apart. There's a little diaphragm under here, and it won't be a problem on this one because this carby, or this whole unit, is so clean it's got to be new or very low hour run unit, but the diaphragm in here can harden up, and it's got to be flexible. If it hardens up, your carby won't work. But I'm going to put a mark there and a mark there, just so that I know which direction this went in when it goes back together. So that's the diaphragm that I was telling you about, and I can see this one is soft and supple, but nevertheless I'm going to blow it out with an air compressor and clean the whole thing. Right, trusty air compressor. Now you don't need an air compressor, it's just that I have one, so I'm going to use it. And you can see what I'm doing is I'm going to deregulate the pressure to probably about 4 bar. If you have too much and you tear the diaphragm, you're in dire straits. What I want to do is just put them on the fuel nozzles and blow the jets out. Yep. Pop that apart. Perfect. That means if I've done that, it means that it's clear. That is a fuel mesh screen filter, so you want to just check that and make sure it's not gummed up. Okay, so just reassemble this. It's pretty obvious which way they go, so basically all of the holes have to line up. So we've got our holes blown out, we know our coil is working, we've got our spark plug. Always at the end of a season, drain these things of fuel, and by that I mean drain the fuel out into, I don't know, a glass jar or something that's clean, because it will evaporate. And once you've drained the fuel out, start your whipper snipper, run it until it runs out of fuel. That means that all of the jets are clean and clear, and it means that you won't get any residue left over once it sits, because the fuel will evaporate and it'll leave all the benzene, the toluene, the xylene, all the crap that affects octane rating and all of the crap that makes it unleaded. That all just leaves a sticky gummy residue in the carby and will stop it running nicely the next year. Now these can really only go one way, so that has to match with that. So we know that the fat fuel hose goes on the bottom one there. If you get lost, just check the photos that you took. It's going to use some screwdriver just to line up the holes there. Wiggle it around so it's perfectly aligned. Pop that in like so. Yeah, that is all lined up. Now we need to put our fuel line, our throttle line back in. This has to go on. I'm just going to put some fuel in this, and I'm going to run it without the air filter on, which is fine, which is ironically how it came to me. Alright, so you can see now when I pull the trigger, it's just notching in there nicely, and that's fully opened. So all I've really got to adjust, as you'll see, is the idle speed screw there, and I'll put some fuel in this, fire it up, hopefully it'll start first go. I'll adjust the idle speed, and then I can give this back to this guy, and that's taken me about 20 minutes. Pre-mix at about 50 to 1. Alright, pretty promising. Alright, I've been trying to work out, this thing would start, stop, run, start, stop, whatever. I thought, what is going on? The carby's clean, spark's good, everything's good, and I thought, I'll have a look in the fuel tank, and you can see the fuel line has broken off. So it runs, then it starves itself of fuel because it can't get any fuel. So I'm going to have to replace this fat fuel line and start again. Right. What do we got here? Alright, one fuel filter. I could probably do this just with this carburetor still on, but I'm going to take that off entirely, and I've just got to pull this fuel line out and replace it. Came out without too much fuss. Okay, reassembled. Got the fuel line on. See that tucked in there? It's a lot shorter now, but still enough. And I'll refuel this and we'll go again. Alright, so we're all reset. I've taken the idle speed screw all the way out. There you go, get some prime. Choke engaged. You want to adjust the idle speed screw so that the bump stop is not spinning. If you screw it in too far, the bump stop will start to spin and you can't change it. So this is pretty much perfect. It's right on the limit of the pipe. Beautiful. Done.